ye children of immortal bliss, even ye that live in the higher spheres. I have found that ancient one who is beyond all darkness, all delusion. Knowing him alone, you will be saved from death. There is no other way. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. Arise, awake, and stop not till the goal is reached. The topic today is the necessity of spiritual practice. This might not be a very popular topic since it means that we need to lyrics. But I think it bears a very significance in our life. We hear very many high philosophical ideas, and we need to be able to have something to base them on and bring them into our spiritual life. Holy Mother says that one gets a vision of God only through His grace. And Ramakrishna said that the breeze of grace is always blowing. But we have to remember what he said next. One must lift his sail to catch the breeze. We hear that we're essentially divine already. And if this is true, what's the need of struggling at all? The problem is, for some reason, we don't realize this. We don't know that it's true. It seems to be hidden from us. And yet it's very close to us all the time. Yes, we need to hear all these higher truths and believe in them. But somehow we have to make them our own. Just intellectually knowing this as a thought is not enough. Yes, it is necessary that we hear and think about the truth of Vedanta, but we must know it in its highest sense. First, we have to hear about the truth. Then we have to think over it. But in the end, we have to make it our own. Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. It must become a realization, not just a thought floating around in our heads. It has to become real for us, so that it permeates every part of our being and is reflected in every one of our actions. Even just hearing these ideas can give us an activating energy to change our behavior so that we will seek for this truth, but we have to practice. Finding out what is real or unreal is sadhana, or spiritual practice. We need to ripen our egos. One sage said, sadhana is accelerated ripening. To see I am nothing, that is wisdom. To see I am everything, that is love. The problem is all the dust and the dirt accumulated through many births that is covering our minds and hearts. Spiritual practice is the way to purify the mind and heart. And when the mind is pure, one sees God. Sri Ramakrishna actually said that the pure mind is Brahman. And in the Bible we read, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The mother says, the room may contain many different kinds of foodstuff, but one has to cook them in order to eat. He who cooks earlier gets his meal earlier too. Some eat in the morning, other in the evening, and yet there's some who fast because they're too lazy to cook. The more intensely a person practices spiritual disciplines, the more quickly he will attain to God. But even if he does not practice any spiritual disciplines, he will attain them in the end. Surely he will. Only he who spends his time idly without practicing prayer and meditation will take a long time to attain him. That's the end of her quote. This is the reason that we need to practice. If we want God now, in this life, we need to struggle. The seeker begins with a simple faith. It's like a hypothesis or a conviction that if we struggle, we will get results. Along with this, the seeker has to have yearning for God, a restlessness that moves him forward. Actually, Ramakrishna said this is the most important thing that we need. As we get more and more involved in our sadhana, our interest in it will grow. And this is called rati. It takes on a sweetness. It becomes pleasurable for us. And then priti dawns on the seeker. This is a kind of intellectual love for the search. And finally, total love blossoms. This is the ripening. The ultimate way and the goal merge, and they're fused together. Ramakrishna says the sadhana drops off from the seeker, not because he's risen above them, but because he has become them. He is the living sadhana. There's no I in it at all. The siddha is not conscious that he's doing any sadhana at all. Swami Vivekananda tells us each soul is potentially divine, and the goal is to manifest this divinity within by controlling external and internal nature. You can do this either by work, worship, or psychic control, or by philosophy, one or more of these. Do it and be free. The sadhanas which are prescribed may differ according to the path followed by the aspirant. Karma, bhakti, jnana, yoga, all may be different in their approach to the sadhana. Doing karma yoga or the yoga of work, we purify the mind. Chitta, shuddhi. The mind becomes pure. We overcome our desires and the samskaras of our minds until we really become unselfish. And as Swamiji said in one of his karma yoga lectures, unselfishness is God. We purify ourselves, our minds. This world will always be a mixture of good and evil. God is ever present within, and our duty is to sympathize with the weak and love even the wrongdoer. If we can distinguish well between the quality and the substance, we may become perfect men and women. There's no action which doesn't bear both good and evil fruit at the same time. And it's extremely difficult to see beyond the surface to the essence behind the person and behind ourselves. We tend to identify with this superficial personality and experiences. And it's more difficult still to work within these surface phenomena at the same time that we're aware of the truth behind it. Yet this is our goal. The knower of truth is always aware of it, in and through everything. There is something really purifying about even just doing physical work and trying to remember God at all times. It somehow enters into our very bodies, as it were, so that as we work, we become more and more aware of the mantra within us with every breath that we take. Holy Mother once said it should go on like the ticking of a clock, going on with every heartbeat. We're so much identified with our bodies that using the body to work and doing it in the proper manner can actually be an aid for the remembrance of God. The sadhana actually can become grounded in our body itself. Spirituality is not a separate part of our lives. It's a constant sadhana in every aspect of our being. Most of us are not able to spend long hours in meditation or even in spiritual study. We need to work to keep our minds concentrated and learn to control our will and action. It's through work that we can progress to the state where it's possible for us to really feel our union with God, no matter what we're doing. And this takes spiritual practice. This is what we're talking about. Vedanta advises us on how to work by giving up the apparent elusive world. What does that mean? It means seeing God everywhere. Do your work. So work, says Vedanta, putting God in everything and knowing Him to be in everything. Work incessantly, holding life as something deified, as God Himself. And know that this is all we have to do. God is in everything, behind everything. Where else are we going to find Him? In Raja Yoga, through meditation, we are forced to deal with the pain-bringing obstructions which arise because of the lack of control of the mind. These obstructions are ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. If we watch our minds, we become aware of what our attachment and aversions are and how they're affecting us and our behavior. We are really bound by what we like and we don't like. If you watch yourself, you'll see you're constantly making these choices. I don't like this, oh, I like that. I don't like that person, oh, I like this person. And it's binding. According to Patanjali, there are pain-bringing obstructions, and once we see them more clearly, we can begin to root them out by such practices as replacing them with contrary thoughts and concentration on higher thoughts. If a thought of anger arises, it can be neutralized with the thought of love. Our fears also have to be faced. Our clinging to life has come about through the recurring experience of various fears, and this clinging has become instinctive. Swamiji tells us, even in the most learned of men, who know that this body's going to die and who say, never mind, we've had hundreds of bodies, the soul cannot die. Even in them, with all their intellectual conviction, we still find this clinging to life. He says it has become a deep samskara, hidden, sleeping in the chitta or memory. All these past experiences of death of the body, all that we call instinct, these experiences become subconscious. They live in the chitta, and they are not inactive. They work beneath the surface. The chitta vrittis, which lie hidden, can only be controlled at their very root. We have to subdue them before they become gross. They have to be conquered by resolving them into their causal state. And meditation is one of the effective means of controlling the rise of these waves. By meditation, you can subdue the mental waves. And if you go on practicing until it becomes a habit, anger and hatred will be completely controlled and checked. And our desires also can be neutralized. Desire is the cause of endless rebirth. These samskaras have to be burned out, as it were, through spiritual experience, and their seeds along with them. Then these passions cannot arise again. The ego also has to be controlled, and this is not an easy matter. It's a very subtle thing. We do something good for another person, something we think is unselfish, but we want to be praised for it. Unconsciously, we seek the honor and the recognition. The ego is so sneaky that even when we think we're non-egotistical, this very thought is egotistical itself. Let me tell you one story. There was a man who was a very great sculptor who said he could make images that looked exactly like the real person. And when he was getting older and he knew it was the time for his death to come, what he did was he made many images of himself. And he laid them out on the floor. And then he lay down in the midst of them. And death came looking for him. And he was looking at all the different bodies that looked all the same. And he said, oh, this man is very great. Look at these bodies. They're perfect. They look exactly the same. How am I going to tell who he is? Oh, look at this. His artistic prowess is wonderful. And then all of a sudden he jumped on one of them. He grabbed him by the neck. And it was the artist. And he said, how did you know which one was me? And he said, your mustache twitched when I praised you. There's the old joke, when it comes to humility, I'm the tops. We have to learn to shift our thoughts from our own self and cultivate the broad, universal truths that are non-egotistical. We have those principles within us. We only have to acknowledge and nurture them. But the mind with its samskaras also dissolves in the long run. And that's what we're struggling for. Patanjali calls this chitta-vritti nirodha, the end of the waves of the mind. The Raja yogi controls the mind and all its vagaries. Through meditation, one can attain a unification of the mind, a concentrated mind. And in this state, the senses are withdrawn, and ultimately the person overcomes the vikshepa of the mind, the projecting power of the mind, the scattered mind. In Bhakti Yoga, the practice focuses on worship and love of God. This also leads to concentration and purities. Mantras and mudras are used, and these actually aid in focusing the mind and heart on God. Shobari was taught by Rama the means to practice bhakti. 1. Fellowship with the holy. 2. Fondness for the stories of God. 3. Practice of self-control. 4. Practice of the virtues. 5. Desisting from manifold activities and pursuing the course of conduct prescribed in the scriptures. 6. Seeing the whole world as full of Rama or God without distinction. 7. Being content with whatever one gets and never thinking of another's faults. Being guileless and straight in all dealings with everyone, and cherishing a faith and love in God for God without exaltation or depression. Sri Ramakrishna raised love from the level of emotions to the level of unity of all selves in God. It said he was outside all bhakti and ecstatic love of God, and inside all jnana and knowledge. Although the principle of oneness of the Supreme Self and its presence in all beings is a central point in the Upanishads, it was seldom practiced in daily life. Sri Ramakrishna saw the divine in his own wife. He worshipped her, in his disciples and others, even in fallen women, and he treated them with respect. The famous words of the New Testament, God is love, and he who abides in love abides in God, from St. John, found its verification in Sri Ramakrishna. This divinization of love and human relationships is a contribution of Sri Ramakrishna which has immense significance for the welfare of humanity. And his chief disciple, Swami Vivekananda, stressed this worship of the living God, every being that wears a human form. His ideal of service is different than just karma yoga. It's actually a union of all the yogas, because you must see the unity of all behind the person. Swamiji tells us, all expansion is life, all contraction is death. All love is expansion. Selfishness is contraction. Therefore, love is the law of life. He who loves lives. The selfish one is dying. Therefore, love for love's sake. As you breathe, you live. By the practice of jnana yoga, through constant discrimination between the real and the unreal, one can destroy ignorance. Sri Ramakrishna tells us that true discrimination is sat asat, vastu viveka, separating the real from the unreal. And what does that mean? He says it's very simple. God alone is real. Everything else is unreal. He saw the world as a play of God. He understood that everything is in essence divine, and he demonstrated to us the bliss that such understanding brings to a person. Using the instrument of vichara and the sharpened discrimination, the seer and the seen have to be separated from each other, and the truth is realized. Let's practice reasoning a little now, a little vichara and discrimination together for a minute. Think about time and space. Here we are. I'm talking to you and you're listening. In a few minutes, the lecture is going to be over. And in a few days, who's going to remember it even happened? Here we are in Trabuco on this beautiful day. And at this very moment in time, so many things are happening here and all over the world. People are actually being born and they're dying every minute. People are waking up, people are going to sleep for the night. And God knows what's going on down in Hollywood Boulevard where I come from. On the other side of the world, in India, in Varanasi, the worship of Shiva is going on. It's night. In the Vishwanath temple, people are chanting and worshiping Shiva. A bed's being prepared for him to rest on for the night. And if I close my eyes, I can be there in my mind. All of it is happening now, in this very moment. What we see before us is not the only reality. What about time? Was I really in that child's body? Sure, other people saw it. There are even pictures to prove it. I remember it, but is it real now? What about my parents and my ancestors? They may be gone now. Did they really exist? In court cases, we bring out proof, evidence, witnesses to prove what happened in the past. We can't see forward into the future yet, but that also must be already out there. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord tells Arjuna that the warriors have already been killed and entered into the mouth of time. It's already happened, and it is happening in the present moment, in endless succession. Is it real? Yes, there is a Vyavaharika Satya, a reality that we agree on here, a transactional reality that is in the present moment and experienced with our senses. Yes, all the moral and social laws apply here, but think, how real is it anywhere, where everything is subject to change and death? Let's look at our own bodies. We feel like we're moving here and there inside this body. It's not the same body that we had as a child. Where is that body now? Even now, think about it. What is this form? In the Viveka Chudamani, it asks us to analyze what it is. The body's made up of flesh, blood, entrails, bones. My God, I'm moving around inside of a skeleton. Think about it. Who are we? Who is moving around in this body? Will this body remain forever? If we reason in this way and separate what is lasting from what is not lasting, what is seen from the seer, what is real from the unreal, renunciation naturally arises in the mind. We know we're not that. Through ignorance, we've identified ourselves with our particular bodies and opened ourselves to misery and cycles of rebirth. When we know who we really are, our ignorance is destroyed forever, and the light of knowledge alone shines. But before we get to the practices prescribed by various yogas, there's certain basic things that are necessary for any spiritual life. Let me qualify first by saying there are cases where people seem to have a sudden vision of God. A story is made about a man who was preparing for a worship of the Divine Mother. He went to a lot of trouble to get all the ingredients because they were very specific things he needed to build the altar. It took him a long time. He was in the forest, and finally he got it all set up and he was ready to go. So he sat down on the seat, and immediately a tiger jumped out from behind a tree and dragged him off and killed him. There was another man who was watching this from behind another tree, and he saw everything. And when the tiger left, he sat down on the worship seat, and immediately the Divine Mother appeared before him and granted him a boon. The man was amazed. He said to the Divine Mother, "Mother, I don't understand your ways. This man went to so much trouble to prepare this elaborate worship, and yet he was killed. I, on the other hand, just sat down on the seat he had prepared, and you offer me a boon. How can this be?" The Divine Mother replied, "My son, you don't know how many austerities you performed in past lives that brought you to this place at this time. That is why I appeared as soon as you took your seat." We can't understand the ways of Maya. Holy Mother said, God's like a child, you know. He denies some who seek of himself and give to some who do not. Perhaps such people had highly evolved souls in their previous lives, and that's why they receive his grace. Many people get a glimpse of something when they turn to spiritual life. Swami Sarvadevananda said that spiritual life actually doesn't even start until you've had some experience. And in fact, I'd have to say all of us have had some kind of grace given to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be listening to this type of a lecture. I'm not saying that what we got was unreal or not spiritual. Surely it was. But we have to go forward. If a glimpse of God is not grounded on spiritual practice and a moral life, it's not going to help us very much. It has to transform our lives. A person who's had a real vision of God should immediately turn to spiritual practice, for nothing else will really be meaningful for him now. Spiritual progress has to be based on this firm moral foundation. A true spiritual experience will transform the person. He or she will immediately turn earnestly to God. Holy Mother tells us, one gets a vision of God through His grace, but you have to practice meditation and japa. These remove the impurities of the mind. One must practice spiritual disciplines such as worship and so forth. As one gets the fragrance of a flower by rubbing it between the hands, or as one gets the smell of sandalwood by rubbing it on a stone, in the same way, one gets spiritual awakening by constantly thinking about God. The mind gets purified after hard tapasya. Without regular practice, nothing can be attained. The mind is rendered pure as a result of many austerities. God, who is purity himself, cannot be attained without austerities. That's the end of her quote. But you have to remember, the middle path is always there too. There's a Zen joke, actually. One Zen student says, "My teacher's the best. He can go without eating for day after day after day." Second one says, "Well, my teacher has so much self-control that he can go without sleep for days and nights at a time." And the third person said, "My teacher's so wise, he eats when he's hungry and he sleeps when he's tired." We don't want to go overboard either with our practice, in other words. In the Vivekachudamani, many prerequisites are given before a person is even considered to be ready to practice jhana. These are things such as, this list is kind of scary because these are considered to be preliminary practices before you're fit. Don't get too worried. Anyway, they are Viveka, discrimination; Vairagya, renunciation; the six treasures; Sama, or calmness, resting the mind steadily on its goal; Dhamma, self-control, turning the organs of knowledge and those of action away from sense objects; Uparati, self-withdrawal, the mind function ceasing to be affected by external objects; Titiksha, forbearance, the bearing of all afflictions without caring to redress them, being free at the same time from any anxiety or lament on their score; Shraddha, or faith, acceptance by firm judgment as true what the scriptures and the Guru instructs; and Samadhamma, or self-settledness. But the last thing needed is mumukshutva, or yearning for freedom. The desire to free oneself by realizing one's true nature from all bondages superimposed by ignorance. This is the one that Sri Ramakrishna really stresses. He said if somebody really has that yearning, the path will open up for he or she. Most of us feel intimidated by this list of prerequisites. It will give us plenty to work on right there. Holy Mother says the devotees who come now simply keep on saying, "Show us God." They don't have any spiritual practice, no prayer, no austerity, and their past sins may be many. These have to be removed step by step. Only then can God be seen. When God is realized, He illumines the soul internally. One knows this immediately. The Shruti also says about one who knows, though with eyes, he is as it were without eyes. Though with ears, he is as it were without ears. Though with mind, he is as it were without mind. When all desires that occupy his heart fall off entirely, then indeed does the mortal become immortal and realize Brahman even here. Swami Vivekananda tells us in his commentary on the Yoga Sutras, the first step, the preliminary step, is called Kriya Yoga. Literally, this means practicing yoga through work. The organs are the horses, the mind the reins, the intellect the chariot. The soul is the rider and the body is the chariot. If the horses, the organs, are well controlled by the reins, the mind, and the charioteer possesses discrimination, then the rider, the soul, reaches the goal. The first steps are yama, the don'ts, that which bring about a compassionate death of the ego. The niyamas, the do's, and next. Yamas consist of non-killing, truthfulness, non-stealing, continence, non-receiving of gifts. And the niyamas are cleanliness, contentment, austerity, study, and self-surrender to God. These are considered to be the first steps in spiritual practices. We have to first of all build up our character, and it's absolutely necessary for the growth of spiritual life. Sometimes we hear very high ideals expressed about our innate divine nature and the oneness of Atman and Brahman, and we're lifted up just thinking these ideas. And Swamiji says we have to keep these ideals before us. The ideas themselves are exhilarating. We feel transported into another realm, and this is wonderful. We have to hear and meditate on these ideals, but we have to build up our character. Otherwise, we will not be able to sustain our spiritual strivings. Character building exercises are essential to our spiritual life, and probably our most significant progress comes as we transform our characters through spiritual practices. A good character is the basis of our spiritual life. The word sadhu implies the practice of spiritual discipline. Swamiji tells us every ripple, every wave that rises in the mind, when it subsides, does not die out entirely, it leaves a mark, and a future possibility of that wave coming out again. And this mark, with the possibility of another wave arising, is what we call samskara. Every work we do, every movement of the body, every thought we think, leaves an impression on the mind. And when such impressions are not obvious on the surface, they are sufficiently strong to work beneath the surface subconsciously. What we are at every moment is determined by the sum total of all these impressions. If good impressions prevail, the character is good. If bad, bad. If a man has good thoughts and does good work, the sum total of these impressions will be good. And they, in a similar manner, will force him to do good in spite of himself. When a man has done so much good work and thought so many good thoughts that there's an irresistible tendency in him to do good, even if he wishes to do evil, his mind, as the sum total of all his tendencies, will not allow him to do so. It's like a gifted musician who plays naturally the right note. Sri Ramakrishna says an expert dancer doesn't take a wrong step. It's not possible for a person to lead an immoral and a spiritual life at the same time. When one person who claimed to have knowledge of unity of existence, but who was living an immoral life, came to Dakshineswar, Ramakrishna says, I spit on your Vedanta. Actually, he said something even stronger than that. If you have advanced to the state of the knower of Brahman, it's not possible for you to be immoral. It is said that there's one way to distinguish between a good and a bad person, a spiritual and a worldly man. The good person, the spiritual person, will remember the one good thing you've done, even if you've done thousands of bad things. On the other hand, the worldly person will remember only the one bad thing you've done, even if you've done many, many good things. There's something we can try practicing right there. Look for the good in others. There are many things we may not be able to change in our lives at the moment. We're faced with things that seem to be out of our control. Our environment, our relationships with people. And at first we have to work within these circumstances. To suddenly try to change these may actually be harmful. But there is a way to work right now and right here, and that is building up your character. Man is a moral being, and it's not something imposed upon us by social conventions or social circumstances. It's innate within us. There is a conscience in us and an integrity in our own hearts. A man does know right from wrong, unless he's a sociopath or something like that. And we don't feel good if we hurt other people. This is not just a social convention. It comes from within. The moral principles are really manifestations of our own inner integrity, our own spirit. And the Vedantins would say that this integrity of our own spirit is a manifestation of the universal spirit of God, as it were. God is sometimes called Satyasya, Satya, the truth of truths. We are truthful, not because social life would otherwise become impossible, but because our own essential nature is truth. The character involves more than just morality. Such things as renunciation, detachment, strength of mind, and faith in oneself are not really counted as moral virtues, but they're very essential for building up the character. Swami Vivekananda once said, in olden times, a person who didn't believe in God was called an atheist, but I say one who does not believe in himself is an atheist. Swami Ashokananda tells us without character, spiritual growth is impossible. He goes on to say in his opinion, strength, the cultivation of fearlessness, the eradication of all kinds of weaknesses are essential factors in the developing of our character. The spirit cannot be fearful, he says. Unselfishness is also a necessary ingredient of character, because to be selfish is to think of oneself in terms of the body and the mind, in terms of this narrow little being, and that is a denial of our true nature. Therefore, selfishness by undermining one's true nature would also destroy character. Selflessness is therefore an essential part of our true character. He urges us to spiritualize our everyday life, seek to feel the presence of God in everything that we do. Offer all you do to the Lord and spiritualize everything as you do it. And along with this, practice charity to other beings. He says one great teacher said, in the beginning, one should observe just three things. Be kind to all beings, be devoted to the name of God, and serve the devotees of God. Then go to a teacher and find out what is the right practice for you, and follow what he says. We can change the samskaras in our minds and transform our character, and ultimately attain to the realization of our own innate freedom. I might say by changing our samskaras, the individual impressions and ignorance in the mind, we're able to overcome the samsara, or cosmic ignorance of repeated transmigration due to the endless chain of karma. So we have to work with good character in this world. Ramakrishna says liberation means entire freedom. Freedom from the bondage of good, as well as from the bondage of evil. A golden chain is as much a chain as an iron one. There's a thorn in my finger. I use another to take out the one that's in my finger, and when I have taken it out, I throw them both away. If a man has a thorn in his hand, he picks up a thorn from the ground and digs it out and then throws it away. The thorn in the hand is our accumulated karmas, made by considering ourselves as doers of action, by our emotional attachment to our actions. This is our ignorance. And by using the thorn of knowledge, right action, we can dig out this ignorance and perfect our characters. So the bad tendencies are to be counteracted by good ones. The bad impressions on the mind should be removed by fresh waves of good ones, until all that is evil almost disappears or is subdued and held in control in one corner of the mind. Then if God is gracious, we can rise above and throw both forms away and be free. A disciple once asked Holy Mother, there are devotees who surrender themselves to God but don't practice any austerities. Will they attain to the realization of God? Mother replied, the fact that they have surrendered themselves to God and that they're living by placing implicit trust in Him is their spiritual discipline. The calf makes the sound humba, humba, I. He makes the same sound even after drums and other instruments are made from his hide and entrails. At last he goes into the hand of the carter, and there he makes the sound too-hoo, too-hoo. It is thou, it is thou. Just surrender yourself to Him, then you will feel His grace. You have to ripen your ego. But there again, it is a subtle thing. Suzuki was once asked, how much ego do you need? And he replied, just enough so that you don't step in front of a bus. As long as we feel there's more we can do, we have to struggle. This is the dilemma. Our problem is that we consider ourselves to be separate entities and think we have to do something. This is our ignorance. But so long as we feel this way, that we are the doer, the karta, we must do spiritual disciplines. Even practicing self-surrender can be a spiritual practice, a sadhana. The method of realization that Sri Ramakrishna gives to the householder is repeat the name of God, sing His glories, and keep holy company. And now and then visit God's devotees and holy men. The mind cannot go on God if it is immersed day and night in worldliness. It's necessary to go into solitude now and then and think of God. One is able to realize God just through love. The ecstasy of feeling, devotion, love, and faith, these are the means. Weep for God, He tells us, in the privacy of your own room. And then there comes a time when you say, no, I can't do anything. I really can't do anything. Yes, at this time a real cry comes from the heart and you seek refuge. Painful as it may be to get to this point, it's a great blessing to reach this state. Then we turn to God and really seek Him. Ramakrishna says, cry to the mother with a real cry on mine. Cry to your mother Shyama with a real cry. And how can she hold herself away? How can she hold herself away from you? Cry. Cry. Can He be realized through practice? How much power does a man or woman have? What can we do to become worthy of the grace of God? Nothing at all. We have to yearn for God, take refuge in Him, and surely He will accept us at His feet. When Swami Sarvadevananda was the attendant of Swami Sarvadevananda once said to him, God helps those who help themselves. When in the course of trying one's utmost, one feels that one cannot go any further, Mahamaya comes and removes the cover. This is Mahamaya's grace. In the eyes of the devotee, it is grace. On the other hand, in the eyes of the jnani, then one is understanding one's greater self. The more one understands one's greater self, the more one thinks he is receiving grace. If you don't want it, you won't get it, even when it's given. Sri Ramakrishna was just waiting to shower His grace, but some didn't take it. Did He have less grace for them? What could He do if they didn't want it? What matters really is the receiving instrument. The grace is always there. The world teachers are always bestowing good wishes, grace, and blessing. But so high as the recipient is, so much will one receive. But one thing does happen. As the aspirant gets grace or blessing, he feels a kind of strength within his mind, and by dint of that strength, he makes a good deal of progress. He then understands that he's made progress because of grace. Besides, association is there. Holy thoughts arise in the mind as one keeps the company of holy people. I remember my own teacher once said, spirituality is not taught, it is caught. On the other hand, if one remains occupied with enjoyment, other thoughts arise. The guru is merely a ghat with steps on the bank of a river for reaching the sea that is existence and knowledge of bliss. The sea is the goal, but the ghats are for different people, and they are different. Holy company is necessary for this reason. One feels a temporary spurt of energy in one's mind through association and moves forward to a great extent. One thinks that it's the grace of the holy person, but it's not right to say that the holy person can do whatever they want. Quote, Hari, God, is inside everyone, but nothing can happen without the will of Hari. There also comes a time when after much struggle one feels as though it is God alone doing everything. One enters the current, as it were. He catches the breeze of grace in the sail. Ramakrishna says, then the boatman sits back and enjoys a smoke. When we realize that in fact everything is happening by the will of God, we'll feel a great peace inside. One may continue to work, but only as God wills it. He knows that everything is really coming from God. After surrendering to the Lord, everything comes from Him. Everything is looked at as coming from Him for your own well-being. Through surrender, the devotee immerses himself into the eternal essence. The more the surrender, the more the grace. The degree of grace is in direct proportion to the degree of surrender. How much control do we have over our lives? Ramakrishna says, actually, we have none. Everything is under God's control. It's all His play. He created a variety of things, big, small, powerful, weak, good, bad. Whether a man is good or bad is all His maya, His play. I see that God Himself is the executioner, the sacrificial victim, and also the sacrificial block. Who are we? Again, Ramakrishna says we're toys in the hand of God and nothing more. He gives us the example of an onion. Keep peeling off the layers, and in the end, nothing remains. Body, mind, intellect, they all disappear. Only God is there. God is the essence. For one spontaneously to get an experience of God is very rare. And it's gotten only if the seeker is already extremely advanced. You may get a glimpse. But people need this ripening of the ego before lasting realization comes. Sadhana's accelerated ripening. Ramana Maharshi says, no one succeeds without effort. Those who succeed owe their success to perseverance. You see, the ego has to be ripened, because if you get a glimpse, even if it's a true experience, and you don't have a ripened ego, it can be misunderstood. You may not be able to digest it. We see that sometimes a person who's had a spiritual experience actually can do harm in the world. They can become fanatical, according to Swami Vivekananda. And it actually can have a negative effect. And this is because they don't have a ripened ego. Swami Ashokananda was a guru during the hippie days. And he once said, Berkeley is such a wonderful place to be. There's an incarnation on every corner. We have to be able to digest what we receive. Yoga involves the two basic processes, purification and concentration. This is a transformation of consciousness, and it's something that every person has to do for himself. Every person has his own yoga, his own combination of the four yogas. And at first, this transformation is restricted to limited parts of personality at certain times of the day. But through practice, the transformation involves the whole personality and goes on all the time. The spiritual and the secular are no longer separated. This is the spiritual solution to the problems of life, and it is done through self-effort and grace. Spiritual sadhana and faith in one's own higher self. Then there comes a unification of being, Swami Sarvadevananda said. Then the real fun in spiritual life comes. The senses turn inward. The mind becomes calm and active. There comes a time when you say, no, I don't have to do anything. Yes, in the end of this stage you feel a desire for silence and solitude. You give up everything and search for Him and Him alone. The mind is awake and serene. We have to perceive ourselves as spirit, a luminous entity, perfect and pure. That is the unification of our being. We take refuge in God. Swami Sarvadevananda says, you may ask me about karma yogins who have reached this state, and in their case, the nature of work changes. They do outer work with a profound consciousness that this is the Lord before him. He quotes the scriptures saying, we see, this is God. He is already before me. Thousands are His feet, thousands are His hands, thousands His head, thousands His eyes. He covers the whole universe with His visible form. And then we close our eyes and plunge deep into that abyss where the eternal truth shines. Vivekananda tells us in his poem, The Cup, I do not bid you understand. I bid you close your eyes to see my face. The soul takes refuge and is absorbed, as it were, into God Himself. If we turn the light knowledge toward our own mind, the mind catches fire and burns out, like focusing the light of the sun on a dried leaf until the leaf catches fire and vanishes in a puff of smoke.
Thank you very much, Prabhrajika Sevavrana. Those who do not know her, Sister Prabhrajika Sevavrana is one of our nuns. She's a resident in our Hollywood Center. We're always very happy to have her here. We will continue talking about the necessity of a spiritual practice in our library during our Q&A. Next Sunday, Swami Sarvadevananda will talk on Holy Mother. Holy Mother is Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual consort. She was his wife. He was his first disciple. And she was born sometime in December 1853. And Swami Sarvadevananda is going to be giving a series of lectures on her life and teachings to remember and honor her. So you're all welcome next Sunday. Also remember, as our tradition goes here at Jabuka Monastery, after his lecture we partake a potluck. So you're all welcome to come with your contribution, sweet, salty, veg, non-veg. We'll make that division there. And of course there will be a Q&A. Let me see. Yes, on Wednesdays we have our scripture class. Starts at 7:30 in our library. And also you're all welcome to join us in our arati at 6 p.m. on Wednesdays. Now Prabhrajika Sevavrana is going to close with a chant. After the chant, let us give her a few seconds so that she can reach the door and greet you all as you leave the hall. And please, you're welcome to join us in our Q&A. Thank you very much for coming.
Om Asatoma Satgamaya Tamasoma Mrityurgamaya Apir Maiti Rudrayakte Dakshinamukam Te Namam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness unto light. Lead us from death to immortality. Reach us through and through ourselves, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all. And we'll have a Q&A.
Please get a copy of that.
Of the audio?
The audio, yes. I don't know how you would do that.